flame where the sparks ignite. Dreams take flight in the amber light. A circle of minds, a fire of thought, building some from what we've got. Grab a log, throw it on. The night is young. The night is young. Welcome to the Inventive Fireside, where wisdom burns and hopes collide. Pull up a chair, let's fan the flame. Together we'll light up the game. The crackling wood, it tells a tale. Lessons learned and ships that sail. Experts speak and the sparks cascade. Fueling dreams that will never fade. Bring your spark, your ember bright. Let's stoke the blaze through the endless night. Inventive Fireside, where wisdom burns and hopes collide. Pull up a chair, let's fan the flame. Together we'll light up the game. Hey, hey. Mike. Round the flame where the sparks ignite. Dreams take flight in the amber light. A circle of minds, a fire of thought, building some from what we've got. Grab a log, throw it on. The night is young. The night is young. Welcome to the Inventive Fireside, where wisdom burns and hopes collide. Pull up a chair, let's fan the flame. Together we'll light up the game. The crackling wood, it tells a tale. Lessons learned and ships that sail. Experts speak and the sparks cascade. Fueling dreams that will never fade. Bring your spark, your ember bright. Let's stoke the blaze through the endless night. Inventive Fireside, where wisdom burns and hopes collide. Pull up a chair, let's fan the flame. Together we'll light up the game. Hey, hey. Mike.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to another Inventive Fireside. Excited to have everybody here. And just as always, just a couple quick housekeeping items. So one thing is, if you're attending this live as opposed to listening to it after the fact, but if you are attending it live, then if you do have questions that are on or as we go through the presentation and go through the material, feel free to go ahead and just ask or throw those questions in the comment just on LinkedIn there. I keep an eye on those, and I'll make sure to raise that during the one-on-one fireside chat. Other quick housekeeping item is we do have a number of webinars scheduled throughout the coming weeks. And as a quick reminder, easiest way that you can go and catch those or see what's coming up and is available, and also register them to get reminders is just to go to my LinkedIn page, click on the events tab, and then you can see which ones are coming up and are of interest. So those are the couple quick housekeeping items. Now into diving into the meat of things a bit. So excited to have another great guest that's going to be being a bonfire presenter. It is Axel, and I'm going to probably slaughter his last name, so I'm just going to call him Axel M, and then he could correct it. But Axel is going to be talking a little bit about how you go about thinking like an owner and winning. So there's, sometimes you get into a business, you get into a startup, and you're thinking maybe either as an operator, or you're thinking as a marketer, or you're thinking as an employee, or you don't know what you're thinking. And so that mindset can often have impact as to the success and or the failure of the business that can lead you to win or to be more or less successful. So should be for a great fireside. I'm looking forward to learning a lot myself, and hopefully you guys find the same. And so with that much as a quick wind up and a pitch and an introduction, welcome on to Inventive Fireside, Axel.
Yeah, thank you, Devin. Thanks for having me.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'll turn things over to you. Maybe if you just want to take just a minute or two to tease out to the audience or to introduce yourself a bit. One thing I did forget to notice is Axel will be on our platform, the Inventive Unicorn, in the next few weeks. Also, we'll be having a podcast episode. So if you want to hear a little bit more about the full backstory of Axel, keep an eye out for that just on the Inventive Journey podcast. But for those that, given that the podcast isn't live yet or isn't out there, and for those that aren't as familiar with it, maybe take a minute or two to introduce yourself, and then let's go ahead and dive into the topic at hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's okay with you, I'm just gonna share my screen and give a little bit of background. So let me know if you can see it, and then I jump right in.
Yep, can see it just fine. Go right on ahead.
Okay, welcome and thank you, Devin. So, um, for myself, I'm originally from Germany and I had my first career, if you want to call it, for 22 years in the Air Force. So, you see here on the left side is the plane for the German Air Force that I flew, and then I came over to the US and got retrained and got the opportunity to fly the plane here on the right. And after doing this overall, like I said, for 22 years, I retired from flying for the military and had the opportunity to get a green card and get recruited into a software company in California, actually in the Santa Barbara area, and did that for a while and then started my own business. You see it here on the top left-hand corner. The Ideal Wealth Grower is the name of the business. And what we're basically doing at the Ideal Wealth Grower is helping people to build a portfolio of real estate assets and then secondary also other assets like gold, silver, Bitcoin, and stocks in limited quantities just to not have all the eggs in the same basket. And this all happened, and like Devin said, we have a longer version of the whole background story later, but it all happened because I realized if you become your own business owner, you don't have these typical protections anymore. If you're an employee, you have maybe a 401k. If you're in the military, you have the community and military housing and military healthcare and all that kind of stuff. So I realized I had to do something. And so what you can see here in the middle was our first investment property in California. Then the second one is the one on the right is a property in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And then the third one is here on the left is a property in San Diego. And we have over the years added more and more in Ohio, in Tennessee, in Idaho and Illinois and so forth. So in parallel to be developing my own portfolio, kind of building that path and going through these experiences, people, friends, colleagues, and so forth asked me about it and wanted to know if they could do it too. And so I really build a structure around it. So the next slide I want to show you is a little bit to what does it mean when I say we build a structure. The core thing, and I call that, and this is a little bit stolen from Brandon Bouchard. I don't know if he is the original inventor of the term BHAG. Exchange time for money anymore. But then that begs the question, okay, we know we want to do these investments in real estate and we really want to have control and own the real estate, but how do we actually learn how to do it? And so anybody who is maybe familiar with coaching and mentoring may have heard about the GROW system or the GROW method that was developed by a guy named John Whitmore. And he wrote a book about it called Performance Coaching. And I looked at it and I realized, well, that's all good and fine, but I want it to be a circle or cycle, right? So we start again here with the goal. Then we check what's your current reality? How is life actually treating you right now? What obstacles and potential opportunities do you face? And then we look at how does that fit to these goals, not just the very big, hairy, audacious one, but also to kind of sub goals like getting to the first property or even identifying where it should be. And that leads us basically to say, okay, what are the first immediate actions that we are going to take or you're going to take for the first 2 weeks until we meet again and have our next session? And that is where the grow system would have normally ended. And so what I did is, and this is why it says grower, I just said, okay, John Whitmore, you did a great job, but I believe we need two. And this one stands for, let's say 2 weeks later, we come back together and I want to know, hey, what were the experiences that you had when you took the actions that we agreed to? And after you told me that, then we want to look at next, okay, what were the results of these actions? And hopefully they got you one step closer to your next sub goal. And this is why this is a cycle, because then we can ask ourselves, okay, based on those results, do we need to adjust any of our sub goals? Typically, we never really adjust the big, hairy, audacious goal, but the sub goals maybe. Right. The other thing on this picture, and I don't expect you to be able to read it in detail, but when you say, why is this thing called ideal wealth grower? You now know why it's called grower, but what about the ideal? Well, that's because when I did this for myself after I started my own business, I wanted to find out what is a kind of investment asset class that has as many benefits as possible, where the government is really behind it. And so I found real estate, and if you look at it, the I stands for income, the D stands for depreciation, the E stands for equity, the A stands for appreciation, and the L stands for leverage. So all these kind of nice little rainy clouds that make our tree grow, they are all here in ideal. So if you were to say, okay, well, that all sounds good, but how does this look in practicality? I just grabbed, and I don't expect you to read this in detail, but I just grabbed one of our currently available properties. And when I say ours, I mean our providers, and you will see this on the next slide that we are working with, who actually develop properties or renovate properties on the regular basis. So this is a property that was built last year, 4 bedroom, 2.5 bath, 1900 square foot, two-car garage, has about a third of an acre lot, and you see all these other numbers, and it costs $270,000. And from our perspective, after you pay the mortgage and you pay property management and all these things, you see up here, and this is the important number, you get 400 and a little bit dollars per month in cash flow. So if you were to say, going back here, that your big, hairy, audacious goal in the context of investing is you want to get $6,000 a month. Well, it's pretty easy. You look at this, you say this is $400 a month. So I need basically 15 properties. Now, getting 15 properties takes a while. I always say it takes probably 10 years. Well, you're not going to keep the rent on this property the same for 10 years. You're going to increase it. So sooner or later, this will become $500. So in the end, you will have to have 10 to 12 of these kind of properties, and you have your $6,000. Now, what happens on the journey there? And this is what this is supposed to show. And this is also what Devin was pointing towards when he said Axel is helping people to actually develop the right mindset, the right attitude. You see here in the left, I wrote, you are in charge. You are the queen or the king of your empire. You are the CEO. What I find with our clients, oftentimes we have been conditioned through our schooling, through college, and through work as an employee to basically have a certain way of approaching things that are not the same as when you are actually in charge, when you're running your own business. So I put you here in the middle as the investor owner of the property. and you have basically employees. They just don't look like employees. You are employing a property management agency for each one of your properties. Why? Because you don't want to have to deal with toilets and renewals and stuff like that. So you hire that out like an employee. Same thing for insurance. Same thing for the financing, right? When you go back to the property, this includes financing. So this $270,000 property, you only putting about $54,000 of your own money in there because the rest comes here from these lenders. They provide a service, you pay them the money back with interest. So they get something out of it. They're providing a service just like an employee. The turnkey provider, this is where we're getting our properties from. Obviously, they are kind of like an employee. Why? Because they find renovate the property and then manage it for you. So that's a really long-term relationship. You have inspectors, lawyers, tax people, and so forth. So long story short, all these are serving you, the investor, the owner of the company. The other thing, just in case you wonder, so what happens actually when you do these mentoring sessions is I help you with gaining the attitude that you need as a successful more and more interesting technology, a lot of it also nowadays having AI, as you can see here in the title, that help you to run your empire better and better. And when you have it all dialed in pretty smoothly, I have 10 of those properties myself, and I spend between 1 hour and 90 minutes per month dealing with my employees on average. Right, so that's basically a really well running smooth machine. And I, for myself, have reached my big, hairy, audacious goal. And I'm always happy to help other people to do that. Now, if you say, okay, that sounds interesting, I only make this slide, Devin. I'm assuming you're probably going to provide the information. But we have a Substack if you like to read our articles. We have our website. If you like to talk to me, you can go on the website, click on the button that says Discovery Call and schedule a call with me. And then I also wrote a book that you can get on Amazon that's literally called The Ideal Wealth Grower, and it describes the process and the tools and the criteria and a lot of other things that go way, way, way deeper than what I can do in 14 and a half minutes. So that's basically my story. And let me see, I stopped the share. And that would be it, Devin.
Awesome. Well, definitely a great walkthrough and helpful overview as far as how people can kind of think about or start to approach or tackle things on a number of fronts, whether it's in the real estate industry and investing in general, or just getting the mindset on, bigger goals and kind of breaking those down. Kind of one of the questions that probably initially come to mind probably are, less on the investing in that, and we'll have to chat a little bit about that as well. But just when you are setting those, what is a big, hairy, audacious goal or a version of it, how do you, is there, in essence, it is a big, hairy, audacious goal, meaning it's out there, it's a stretch goal. But sometimes you can go one of two ways. It's not really a stretch goal and it's pretty easily attainable, or vice versa. It's one where you set it so audacious so that there is, a 0.01% chance of ever reaching it, and then you become disillusioned when you don't even get close. And so is there any thoughts as to the balances to where how you can set some of those goals to have that as a direction that you can head in towards, and have that as a goal without getting under or overwhelmed?
Well, what I have learned over the years is that it really has to do a lot with the age of the person that we're talking to. And I challenge anybody, especially if you are a little bit more mature, to go back in your memory and say, okay, how was I at 15? How was I at 25? How was I, if you can, with 35 and so forth? And what you will find when it comes to this hairy, audacious goal is almost true for any other goal as well. The further away you are from realizing that goal and younger at the same time, the more likely it is that what you think a really challenging visionary goal is at 20 or 25 or 30 is going to change a whole bunch of times. Now, that's why I also say, yes, you want to have this really long-term, big, almost audacious, not easy to achieve goal out there. But you also, in parallel, and as you saw, I said this is the number one thing we do very at the beginning, at the first thing, is what's the big goal and what are some more realistic sub goals. Like the first thing that most people say for the realistic sub goals is to say, okay, I want to get to these, let's say, example, $6,000 a month, but my first sub goal is to get my first property in the next 6 months, right? And so then the sub goal becomes, or the sub goals going forward are in a way stepping stones, right? And what happens is when you think back, and that's why I explained this cycle, is every time we have created a result from our meeting and from our actions, we check, is this sub goal still the right goal? And it doesn't mean, no, I don't want a house in 6 months anymore, but it might mean, well, I can maybe either get it in 5 months or it might take an extra month. So you're adjusting a little bit and you're adjusting a little bit. What you don't want to lose sight of is what is the real big goal unless something happens in life. Just give you a quick example here. Let's say you have $1,000 or $1,500 a month that you could put aside into your investing account, and then at the end of the year you try to get another house because you put $20,000 aside. And somehow somebody offers you a new job in a different location where your income goes up substantially, right? Now, when the time horizon may have been 10 years or 11 years to get to your total portfolio, but now you can do twice as much or three times as much money aside. Now you can absolutely accelerate, and the big, hairy, audacious goal that was 10 years in the future suddenly becomes way more realistic. Now, flip side of that same coin, you may have said this at 29 and a half all by yourself, being frugal, and you find the love of your life and you're making a family and you're having quickly two or three kids, well, now the goals are different, right? And now you have to not just look at your sub goals, you also have to look at your big, hairy, audacious goal. And one adjustment might be I push it out a little longer, but you might also need more than 6 grand, right? So those kind of things give an indication. What I want to say last about this is some people take this volatility as a reason to say, well, if I can't really be sure that it remains the same, why do I even have one in the first place? And to me, I want to get the message across. The motivational aspect of getting a goal, setting sub goals, and then starting to accomplish them is almost like you're charging up the battery. Every time you take a little step and it works out, you really feel this additional energy. I've had cases with clients where they got the first property, the second property, and they got crazy and started borrowing money from everybody to get the third property way earlier than they were ready. Right? They got basically drunk on getting to the properties. And then my role suddenly goes from encouraging you to do something to kind of, put on the brakes a little bit so that you're not overdoing it and not somehow getting crazy. But that is not uncommon. Anybody ask yourself if you really ever set yourself a goal or two or three and you start getting there, it's just a special feeling and a special energy that makes us work even better, even faster, and all kinds of stuff starts happening.
No, that's definitely a helpful guidance and insight. Along those lines a little bit, but maybe a different question. I mean, you'd hit on that, as people are getting to different phases of life, first of all, what that goal may be and the scope and the runway would be different. So in other words, if I'm 20 and I have planning on retiring by all this, 65, well, I have 45 years versus if I'm 60 and wanting to retire by 65, I have a much shorter time frame. If you were to now look more specifically, kind of as you'd hit on as real estate investing and kind of throwing off that cash flow and getting that income, how do you figure out, sometimes if my goal is I want to retire with, I'll say $20,000 a month to make it a nice or cushy retirement, and yet I only have 5 years to do it. How do you balance the sense of urgency versus, I'm 20 and now I have what feels like unlimited amount of time and I'll just push that off forever? How do you kind of set realistic goals and parameters and timeframes?
In my experience, both my life experience, but also in general from the work over all these decades, I would say it has mainly to do with how many mistakes can you survive, right? If you think about it, if you were to go just on a simple idea on the S&P 500, and by the way, anybody listening to us or watching us can do this, go on the S&P 500, go back 30 years and say, imagine you had started 30 years ago, your 20-year-old guy that you just mentioned, Devin, where would he or she be if they're 50 now and it's 30 years ago? And even if the number is not very big, if you put, I don't know, I give you one example that I calculated recently because somebody challenged me, what is actually possible. He asked me, what can a newborn actually accomplish in what amount of time? And the question was getting to $100,000 in the portfolio, right? So here's the newborn. The parents decide every month we're going to put $100 and we're buying Nvidia and we start 15 years ago. How old is the kid when he gets to $100,000 asset value? What do you think, Devin?
I'll go to $100,000 or asset value. Nvidia is one where it depends on when you invested. They were rocket ship for a while. I would say if I invested today, 10 years. I don't know. I'm not a good estimate on that, but I'll go with 10 years. Apologies on that. We had a slight technical difficulty. We got to the peak of the question, and then it cut out on me there for a second. So I believe the question, just to reiterate for those that are in here, was,
Yeah,
what is
absolutely. So the question was, you're a parent, you have a kid, you say, I put $100 aside for the kid. With those $100, I buy Nvidia shares, and I do this basically starting 15 years ago, $100 every month. Here we are 15 years later. At what age did the kid have a $100,000 asset value?
I'll guess 10 years, and it's honestly a pretty much a shot in the dark because I really
Yeah,
I'd have to give a
yeah.
lot, probably a lot or greater thought or do it on a more frequent basis, but I'll throw out 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. I was surprised myself as well. It's actually seven, a little over 7 years old. But the point is more, since you said, somebody who's a 20 or 30 or older person, that was your question. The point is that 15-year-old now has already about a $3 million asset value. So how does that answer your question about like the urgency? And the point is how many mistakes? I mean, if everybody would have known that you only needed to put $100 in Nvidia starting 15 years ago, we would all be rich. But we didn't know. So the point is that would be, or you could look at it as saying, you and I, Devin, because I didn't do it either, made a mistake. We may have done other things that worked out, but in that context, NVIDIA investment would have probably the best thing. So when you say what is the difference between somebody in their 20s or 30s with like 30 or 40 years ahead of them versus the 60-year-old who wants to go and still make something meaningful, is number one, review what they have, and is that the stuff that is actually getting them as close as possible in the remaining 5 years that they set for themselves to their goal? And number two, and this may not be related to real estate, is are you willing to take the risk for 5 years to have at least the opportunity to succeed? Because ultimately, it's really a matter of risk, right? I mean, I give you one example since we're talking about life. If you would have been smart yesterday night before the market closed, and that 60-year-old would have said, okay, I invest $100,000 out of my 401k plan without a penalty because it's over 59 and a half into MicroStrategy shares because it gives me leverage to Bitcoin without owning Bitcoin. Today, that stock increased 23.5% in a day, right? Now, am I saying this will happen every day for the next 5 years? No. But that would be the kind of, in the one hand, risk, reward, opportunity kind of thing that you might have to be willing to do. If you say, I have maybe 500,000 and I know I really need to get to 3 million, I have 5 years left.
Gotcha. No,
Right?
I think
That's the
that
difference. The one guy can say, I put $100 in the most fastest growing, most solid stock for the next 20 years, and I probably don't ever even need to get to 60 or maybe not even to 50. But the 60-year-old has to try to find something that has a lot of leverage and hope to be right.
Yep. Or just go to Las Vegas and put it all at black or put it all at red or black or what or on or whatever and see if it works out. But no, I think that's a
Yeah, I
better
wouldn't
way you
recommend
outlined
that
it.
because you all know the house always wins, right? Even on that. So in the
It's
stock market,
true.
you have at least a reasonable chance.
That's fair enough. So, well, there's plenty of more things I'm sure we could talk through and have great conversations. We're already reaching towards the end of this inventive fireside, so we'll have to maybe have you back on or on this or on one of our sister platforms. But as we do wrap up today, I do always like to wrap up each fireside with the same question. I always kind of give the same caveat, which is, I love to read but I don't like to read books. And the reason I say that is I like to read audiobooks or listen to audiobooks probably more so. But I always am listening to something, whether it's a podcast, audiobook, and always trying to consume new and good information and keep up to speed and learn something new. And so I always love to ask or throw out the final question, which would be, what's one of your top books or podcasts that you'd recommend? Oh, looks like we may have temporarily lost you. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Sorry about that. Seems like the internet wants to be or take a break or take a
Can
breath
you hear
and
me?
catch back up every minute or so. But no, the question I'd asked is maybe, or the question I always like to wrap up with is, what's one of your favorite books or podcasts?
Well, books, I would say The Wealthy Gardener by John Soforic. And I know he wrote another follow-up book recently, but I still like the anybody in the audience to start with that one and then maybe get the other one. For podcast, I actually like the Moonshots.
Yep, both of those are good ones, and enjoy both of those as well. So those are great recommendations. So. Well, awesome. Well, as we do wrap up, if people do want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
The easiest is to go to ideawealthgrower.com, like I showed on the slide. On the top right-hand corner, you find a button that says Discovery Call. You just click on that, find a day and time that you like, and then we talk and we go from there.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, expand their network, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So, with that, thank you again, Axel, for coming on the Inventive Fireside and sharing some great information and knowledge. As a quick reminder to the audience, if you do have, if you want to be a guest on the fireside and or on the podcast, always welcome you to apply. You can just go to inventiveunicorn.com. And also, as I mentioned at the onset, if you do want to check out any of the upcoming Inventive Firesides and get that information or register for those, you can just go to my LinkedIn tab or LinkedIn page and click on the events tab. So, with that, thank you again, Axel, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Yeah, thank you, Devin. It was a pleasure.
the sparks ignite. Dreams take flight in the amber light. A circle of minds, a fire of thought, building some from what we've got. Grab along, throw it on. The night is young, the night is young. Welcome to the Inventive Fireside, where wisdom burns and hopes collide. Pull up a chair, let's fan the flame. Together we'll light up the game. The crackling wood, it tells a tale. Lessons learned in ships that sail. Experts speak and the sparks cascade. Fueling dreams that will never fade. Bring your spark, your ember bright. Let's stoke the blaze through the endless night. Inventive Fireside, where wisdom burns and hopes collide. Pull up a chair, let's fan the flame. Together we'll light up the game. Flame where the sparks ignite. Dreams take flight in the amber light. A circle of minds, a fire of thought, building some from what we've got. Grab along, throw it on. The night is young, the night is young. Welcome to the Inventive Fireside, where wisdom burns. Let's fan the flame, together we'll light up the game. The crackling wood, it tells a tale. Lessons learned in ships that sail. Experts speak and the sparks cascade. Fueling dreams that will never fade. Bring your spark, your ember bright. Let's stoke the blaze through the endless night. Inventive Fireside, where wisdom burns and hopes collide. Pull up a chair, let's fan the flame.